Welcome to D&D.
Not that D&D.
I am Eller the Disciple.
I am Tally the Dissenter. We recently watched a video by the Antibot responding to a Christian apologist, and we had some thoughts on it, but we didn't want to do like a reaction to a reaction. So we just kind of wanted to talk about the main topic,
which was deconstruction. And so first of all, just in case these are new words or something you wanted to know more about, you've heard it before, we wanted to get some definitions for apologist. Basically, a simple version of that definition is just someone defending a doctrine or faith with arguments. And deconstruction is critical analysis of text and meaning. It can also relate to, in this context specifically, it's relating to Christians who challenge the beliefs of that they've been handed. And so one of the things we wanted to talk about is that he called deconstruction a trend,
which is just silly because people have been questioning things since the beginning of time. That's how we ended up with science and the scientific method. People ask questions. They want to know why things work the way that they work. And obviously there's some things we may not know the answer to, but I feel like we have pushed a lot of things against a wall of, is this true or not? Because it's in our nature in some ways.
Yeah. And for me, I look at it as it's the evolution of Christianity, that you would want to be able to withstand the questioning and to survive and to become maybe a better, fuller understanding of what it means to be Christian.
And I mean, I would say that I started my deconstruction pretty young in life, but also a long time ago. So maybe it's just because we're using this word and the word is more of a new conversation, but it's definitely not just trendy.
No, but I do think what has happened is part of a response, if you will, to people leaving church is that leaders have started evaluating, okay, why are people leaving the church? I think leaders are questioning the fundamentalism and the evangelical mindset and maybe becoming what some would consider liberal or progressive. More recently, I've heard the term emergent Christianity. And I think that's interesting, like, because they're still apologists. They're still Christian apologists.
Although I would have to say this person that they were responding to in the video would have said we're not Christians. We're not true Christians. So that was one of the things that we kind of talked about a little bit was while we were watching it and wanted to discuss was the no true Scotsman fallacy. And an example of that might be no Scotsman puts sugar on their porridge. And somebody responds and says, well, my uncle's a Scotsman and he put sugar on his porridge. And the reply back would be, but no true Scotsman. And it's like, well, no, they're still a Scotsman. They're still Scottish. And it's the same thing of like, this person doesn't get to say, oh, you're not a true Christian. No true Christian would walk away or deconstruct or whatever.
Yeah, no, and that was definitely his argument, is that they weren't true Christians in the first place. And it really bothered me, when we talked that first time about the true Scotsman fallacy, and I was using it in the context of that person's not a Christian, what I would consider a Christian, right? A couple of things come to mind. First of all, I kind of realize I see apologetics as kind of having two different paths. And like one path is this idea that the circle gets smaller and exclusive. And that's definitely where the person that they were reacting to, I think, falls, is, no true Christian, so the circle is small because you didn't fit inside. Other apologists that I've read, like C.S. Lewis, I think for them, God gets bigger, has to get bigger. The circle widens to become more inclusive. And that is more what I ascribe to when I think of apologetics. Now, the first time you and I had this conversation and I said, well, that's not a true Christian, it really bothered me because it was like, oh, so yeah, they're out there and they're proclaiming that they're Christians.
And therefore they are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm not God. I don't get to judge.
Well, okay.
But yeah.
The reality is, I know there's like that phrase that is, going to church doesn't make you a Christian anymore than
Right.
standing in a garage makes you a car.
Right.
I get that, but it also is like, it's giving permission to ignore the real problems in Christianity that have been repeated problems, not just one-offs.
Right, right. So I think coming on the heels of our values and beliefs discussion, it was kind of like a light bulb moment to realize, okay, well, what it is that they proclaim a type of Christianity that has different values than the Christianity I ascribe to. And that really is very helpful to me to go, oh, okay, that's where there is a difference. And I think when you say, well, it's not a true Christian, that's, you're trying to make a distinction, you're trying to make a difference. He is doing the same thing. But where it ends up landing is it's really just a difference in values and what we mean by the word Christian, even.
Going back to what I said just a minute ago about it giving permission to ignore some problems, it's like the all lives matter thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we've had that conversation.
It's just permission to ignore the issue.
Right.
And saying Black Lives Matter is not saying that other lives don't matter. And to frame it that way is to dismiss the real issue, the real problem with police brutality and the murder of Black people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really important to take a minute to even acknowledge that, right? Because Black lives do matter.
Just in case you're not, if you want to know where this,
and if you want to, like
this channel lands,
that's
Black Lives Matter and land back and science is real, all that stuff.
Yeah,
and know the Earth is not flat.
That is right. The Earth is not flat. It's not even perfectly round. There's that whole thing.
I don't know. I think I wouldn't be very perfectly round if I had a whole bunch of pressure as I spun.
There you go. But yeah, so that difficulty of like, okay, so what we have here is really a values problem. And when somebody proclaims that Christ, when we rewatched the video and I thought about the fear that they're like kind of using to keep people in faith, I was also thinking, these people do not understand influence. So they only understand power. And I would love to talk about that again at another time, the difference between power and influence, because I think I was raised very much in an environment where people use parenting, kind of like a parenting model where people use their power instead of their influence. And I've watched you parent as someone who has influence and using that as a parent. And I think it's a really beautiful model. And I think the people that use fear do not understand.
Gosh, it's so interesting that you say that, because this made me think of, with that fear model of parenting that seems to be very common, like the authoritarian parent. I think because it's like this idea of that children should be seen, not heard, and like you need to disobey or you need to listen to me and obey me, and it's very like, keep you under the thumb sort of thing. And it is something that translates into a lot of this dogma. And the thing that I felt like when I realized that was never going to work for me as a parent was it felt like I wasn't seeing the child as a human independent of myself with own thoughts, feelings, emotions, and nurturing that to become a cool person. And that's really what I've tried to do as a parent. And I've tried to keep in mind that it is another human. This is a human life. This is not, just some thing that you can make listen to you.
Well, and I think what's interesting is then they don't just see it in that realm. That's how they see God too. Is God is angry.
Yeah.
God is gonna get you. One of the clips they have a pastor's like, God's gonna get you. You don't think it's just gonna hurt his feelings. He's gonna get you. And I'm like,
oh yeah, that was in that whole section about. There was this whole part of that video that was like not 100% related to the deconstruction, but the whole Jesus isn't like a sissy. And it was like, oh yeah, the worst thing that can ever happen is somebody is feminine. Like,
yeah.
It's just, and I highly recommend the Antibot video. I will go ahead and put a link in the description, just so if you want to take a look after, or if you've already seen it, that's great. But it's a really well done video. I feel like they said a lot of great things. So, and that was one of the things that basically she had said that I agree with. That it was just like, oh yeah, we're just gonna insult everything that's feminine.
Well, and that's it. And I mean, so again, back to let's support the patriarchy. Let's make sure the men are in control, and never like it ignores so many things that are in the Bible that give us a fuller understanding of God. It's a very small understanding of God at the end of the day for me.
Into a box.
Yeah. So did he answer why deconstruction? No.
No, I mean,
has he done anything?
Says, oh, it's because you didn't actually believe in the first place.
Yeah.
And it's like, you have no idea. With a friend, I watched the movie Save this weekend with a friend who had never seen it. And we had both gone to religious schools. So it was like, oh my God, you have to watch this. And it was really fun to like have that, because you have very similar experiences. And that movie is like satire, but also sometimes a little too real. Especially if you've gone to Christian school. The entire time in the movie, the main character is very much like a believer. She was raised in Christianity her whole life, and it's very like you get her internal dialogue as she's going through the movie, and you can really see like her journey of trying to deal with this crisis of faith, this form of deconstruction. And it's a small form of deconstruction in that movie, but it's like, I don't know how you could listen to what she was going through and what she believed throughout that film as you get her inner monologue and not believe that she truly believed. Like, that is just
right.
And I feel like that's also part of it. If you are somebody who is like in my situation, raised in the church, was a true like full on bought into it, a lot of my inner monologue for a lot of my life sounded much like hers, of being very seriously into my faith. And so how can you sit there and say somebody who's gone through that and is now deconstructed and no longer believes those same things, they didn't really believe it?
Well, so first of all, I don't think he does any service to his audience, because one of the points that the Antibot and
genetically modified skeptic
made was that the audience for that person would be probably somebody older, and the person that the older person listening to the apologist, so hopefully you can stay with that, is younger people, the people that are going through deconstruction, right? He doesn't do any service for having a conversation with those folks. First of all, he has a lot of hubris, thinking he's God and can read people's minds.
Yeah.
That's first. And that he even gets to decide who's a Christian or not a Christian. And as somebody who struggled with the new true Scotsman,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there was even a part of me, well, okay, if they're not Christians, they're bad Christians. And, you know, really kind of struggling with that my own self, right? And going, okay, I don't get to decide. You're right. They're out there saying they're Christians and whatever. It's just definitely very different than what I believe it means to be a Christian. So, that being said, the way he was presenting, if people talked to their family like that, they're just going to destroy the relationship. There's no, like, even a purpose of doing that. There's no benefit.
Yeah.
Because all you're doing is shutting down communication. If you talk to people like, oh, well, you're not a true Christian, da 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 da. You don't care about the relationship if you're talking to somebody about that.
No, that's terrible.
So that was something that really bothered me about his whole conversation. Is like, you know, the superiority, right? And the hubris that was there. Instead of like just recognizing you're a person. And, you know, the thing about deconstruction, we've both kind of gone through it. And we've landed in different places. For you, it's more of the atheist mindset. Like, I don't want to speak for you. For me,
I have no proof that this exists. And at this point in my life, it doesn't change how I want to live my life.
Right. And for me, I'm still a person of faith. And, you know, in a few videos back or episodes back, we talked about Brian McLaren. Well, actually, it was our first video. We talked about the spheres of the faith journey. And I really like the spheres because he uses phases and that seems linear. And I really like the spheres because they can overlap each other.
Do you think it's like a moving Venn diagram? Like it
could be. Yeah, absolutely.
Like, okay.
Absolutely. So 4 areas, the simplicity, which this guy is really going for, but it's...
I'm going to be completely honest. When you were talking about that, I was thinking, I don't know that we ever move out of that one. We want it so badly.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I learned a little bit about the science of why our brain wants it so badly.
Oh.
So we'll talk about that maybe in another episode.
Okay.
But then complexity, and that's the wrestling of with like, okay, well, I don't really feel like this is what my experience is. And then deconstruction. And after deconstruction is harmony. And with harmony, there are different paths. And harmony, I think, is something that moving Venn diagram is really kind of perfect because it is kind of a moving target. And you know, as you kind of feel like you figure one piece out, there's another piece that comes up, and you might have to go through all of the steps that you go, oh, I had a simplistic thinking about this. And now it's going to progress through other spheres of thinking. But the critical analysis in Christianity, a lot of people, I kind of remember some things with like Pat Robertson or the 700 Club, I think is the name of it.
Gross.
Like this idea of how dangerous critical thinking is.
What? Yeah, I don't think I ever.
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! Check out some. You know, like,
no, thank you.
No,
oh my god!
Look. Yeah, I'm like, well, you should, because you should check your sources. But that's part of critical thinking. But critical thinking is important.
Yeah,
especially when we have a society that's subject to manipulation. We have leadership that's subject to wanting to manipulate people.
Just die?
Who?
Didn't somebody just die? Was it Pat Robertson? It was Pat Robertson died.
Oh, not that long ago.
Yeah, it was in June.
Was
Happy
it really?
Pride Month.
Was it really in June?
I think so.
Gosh, it feels so much longer than that for me.
Yeah,
okay.
Not long enough. I mean, what? Sorry. We can cut that out.
yeah. But anyway, so I really do hold to the idea that, you know, if Christianity is going to evolve
and to survive,
to grow. I mean,
because the reality is it is shrinking right now.
And maybe there's a big part of me, it's shrinking because we've lost the good news. because we would rather give people a bunch of rules and then make them say a magical prayer and make sure that they have repentance, like this guy was saying, and that's how you're a true Christian, and all
But
this
then,
nonsense.
like, you can't be a true Christian if you ever stumble again, and you have to go back through it.
But we don't live into the value of the two commands, which is to love God and love your neighbor.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I mean, that's like, that is in some ways very simple. It's also very difficult to do.
Yes.
Because you have to deal with difference.
Well, and we went and saw that play, The Christians, I think it was called, and one of the things, like, the main issue of that play was that the pastor of this church had decided that when he was reading the story about how you become redeemed by Christ dying, he decided that it meant that there was no special prayer. It wasn't about, oh, you have to accept God into your heart and stuff. That everybody was redeemed because Christ died. And it was a big problem in that, like, that was the whole, you know, thing of the play. And it was just so interesting because I definitely, it made me think, you know, I think that there's certainly an argument to be made that that is the case and that is what it says.
Yeah.
And so if people don't like it, they don't want to hear it. They want you to listen to their rules and do the things. Like, I think there's this really weird thing, and we've had this conversation before, where for some reason we think that being atheist means you have no morality.
Well, yeah, absolutely. There is an equating of atheism to no morality.
And you, I think, even asked me one time, like, where my morals come from. And my morals come from that core message of loving other people. And that core, now that I would say is a core value. And I feel like we kind of talked about in the myth episode, the Bible is not the only source for that. And there are some people who don't, who just don't want to accept that. And I think when I did Dare to Share in middle school, it was like a conference where they were teaching us how to go door to door and preach, essentially, trying to share the good news. And they also used, like, donating food, or like collecting donations for a food bank as part of why we were knocking on people's doors. And in retrospect, that stuff makes me feel real gross because,
well, and I feel really gross as a parent because I had no idea, and now learning that, I have a lot of regret. You know, it's just like, what about consent? You know,
well, yeah, in like most research stuff, you have, like, in sociology and most research, you have the idea of informed consent. And as you know, like, what, a 12-year-old, I didn't understand everything. And it's in retrospect that I'm going, ugh. And one of the questions that they would have us ask people when they would say, like, something like, I believe I am a good person. And the question that we were supposed to ask is, what if you're wrong? And that definitely made me go, well, what if we're wrong?
Yeah.
So that question has to go both ways. Like,
well, and then that question's back to the fear and the fire insurance, and that's what Christianity is. And it's like, wait a second.
That's a whole other thing.
You're reducing what it means to be a Christian to what's going to happen to you when you die.
Oh, we have a whole episode planned for that.
And instead of the call to love and justice that I feel is repeatedly told in the stories Jesus tells.
Well, we will definitely, in our death denial episode, we will talk about it.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. But this one was, I tell you what, this guy,
yeah. I feel like what they said in their video was that he is also kind of seen as a weirdo in normal apologist circles. So, you know, he might be on a bit of an extreme.
But there are people, I mean, the fact is, there are people out there.
He had 200,000 views.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
It's not like he didn't have people watching.
No.
He has a lot more views than we currently have.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Exactly.
someday, 200,000. Woo! That would be like a really big deal. I was excited when we got to 5 subscribers.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you, your 5 subscribers. So I hope this episode was fun for you and whatever is coming up for you this week. And wherever you're at in the journey of faith, if you're on a journey of faith, simplicity, complexity, deconstruction, harmony. We wish you the best.
Yeah.
And we hope that whatever you're facing, you have the strength and the competence and the support to do what you need to do.
And thank you for watching. If you like the video, subscribe, all the buttons, all the things.
Tell your friends.
Yes, share, all that stuff. Maybe again someday, 200,000.
Yeah.
But we appreciate you every time that you come and watch. So
yes,
thank you.
We do.
Bye.
Bye.